Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update. The first one, there are 4 this year. The first one for 2025. This is, of course, the 1st of January 2025. These are the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, and you can find them, as ever, in the description to the video below. I hope you have all had a suitably enjoyable New Year's celebration with half an eye on the horrors that are taking place around the world. But for our own mental health, I guess we need to keep as positive as possible, but also know that things are pretty tricky for example, the Ukrainians fighting for freedom and sovereignty in Ukraine. 1,002, and indeed in Kursk in Russia. 1,250 Russian personnel lost in the last 24 hours. So that's dropped right down. I don't know whether that is because of the day of the last 24 hours being, naturally assaults might not take place as people might just take a breather. Russians might go, well, let's not attack today. It's New Year's Eve. Let's attack tomorrow, or I don't know whether that makes any difference whatsoever, whether they go, well, actually, they think we're not going to attack today, so we will attack today. I don't know. But it's certainly dropped by a good 400 or so from yesterday, and 800 from what we have seen in the last week, where we saw it over 2,000. 4 tanks is a pretty low number there. 13 troop-carrying AFVs likewise, and 4 artillery systems. Very, very low for that category. What we do have is 1 helicopter added to the list, and actually you might get 2. You might get a second one added tomorrow. Remember the unmanned sea vehicle, the Magura V5 Sea Baby drone in the Black Sea, shot down using an R-73 air-to-air missile, shot down a helicopter that was caught on camera, and there were claims that another one was hit, and now we understand that that one went down as well. So it could well be 2 helicopters, although difference with the other one is it wouldn't have been caught on camera. This one was caught on camera, and so that's why you see it added to the list. So you might not get the other one added, although there's good evidence to suggest it has gone down. 49 vehicles and fuel tanks is okay for that category, and 1 piece of special equipment added there as well. So much lower numbers for yesterday. We have a couple of Andrew Perpetual loss lists. The first one refers to the 30th of December, so that is fairly close to now. 158 personnel lost, caught on camera there, and the stats are looking pretty good for Ukraine in terms of the overall numbers, 3-1 or thereabouts. For equipment, Russian equipment lost to Ukrainian equipment, and for combat asset losses, it's about 1.5-1, knowing though that all of these ATVs would pretty much be combat assets, and some of these civilian vehicles as well. So it's at least 1.5-1, maybe as much as 2.5-1 or something like that. Okay, let's look at the Ukrainian figures, and interesting things that have been lost from the Ukrainians here. Although, goodness me, that does not looks like a different list. We have all of those tanks there, and then only a couple of tanks there. That looks like a different list. Don't know what's going on there. If we go, interesting. Let's go. I think that's the wrong screen grab. Let's look at the list from the actual. Let's look at the original list here from Andrew Perpetua. So 158 personnel lost. I think that screen grab could be from another one. Okay, looking at the Ukrainian losses, we have a unmanned sea vehicle, so that's the Magura V5 drone that one seems to have been taken out there. We have some artilleries, M119, M109, Lancet and Vandal drones. Vandal drones doing quite a bit for the Russians at the moment. Tanks, there's about 8 tanks here. Most of those destroyed and abandoned, including 2 Leopard 105s, 1 abandoned, and then hit by an FPV drone, 1 destroyed, and an M1 Abrams destroyed, unknown cause there. So another loss of an M1 Abrams. They can't have too many of those lost. I do wonder whether Ukraine should get another consignment, and then it's not too much for the Americans to do that in terms of the fact that they've got an absolute bucket load of M1 Abrams. So you could easily give a whole host of Abrams to Ukraine without that touching the sides, without that affecting the American strategic reserves. Is whether there are other pieces of equipment that are more important than the Abrams, but that I think they just still do need tanks, right? Are they going to get by with just using Leopard 1s instead? I don't know. And then some other tanks thrown in there, T-64s, T-72s, whatnot. Infantry fighting vehicles, 3 of those, 1 Mardat, 1 A3 abandoned, 2 BMP-1s, older Soviet pieces of kit destroyed. APCs, 4 of them on the list, a couple of M113s destroyed and abandoned, and then the BTR, I don't know what this one, BV, that's a Bandsvarn S10, so that looks like a BVS-10. I would have thought that's a Swedish one, but it might not be. Let's have a look. BVS-10. Okay, that is, yeah, not the recent ones they were given. This is one of the articulated ones. So that has been lost there. So an articulated APC has been damaged by an FPV hit. They do have a fair few of those, I think, in Ukraine. They're obviously not going to be used, I don't think, too close to the front line. MRAPs, a couple of those, a couple of infantry mobility vehicles, Humvee and a Euro Vantak. Not sure what that one is either, and so on and so forth. Right, when we look at the Russian losses, first of all, it's worth noting there's a vast number of ATVs, mainly quads, but 3 Desert Cross 1000-3, the Golf buggies, thrown in as well. When we go up to the combat asset losses, an air defense book M1 or 2, M12 has been destroyed, and we have a couple of boats there, 1 sunk and 1 destroyed. D20 artillery piece destroyed, and then we're on to tanks. There's a good 8 tanks there. Interestingly, 5 of them are tracked garden sheds. That tells you a story, doesn't it? 5 out of 8 tanks lost were tanks that can't really be used as tanks. We're wondering whether they have a shortage of tanks, wondering whether they have a shortage of infantry fighting vehicles or APCs even, that they get used as. You could build a case for all of those options being true. Infantry fighting vehicles, there's a good 20 here, or near enough. Most of them, all but 2, abandoned and destroyed. BMP-2s, BMP-1s, BTR-82s, and other variants as well. So that's a pretty hard list for the Russians to swallow there. It's quite a few bits of kit taken out. And then we're down to AFVs and APCs and whatnot thrown in as well. So I think on balance, that's a bad day for the Russians, especially losing an air defense system, although the Ukrainians have lost an M1 Abrams tank and a couple of Leopard 1A5s as well. So they have lost more tanks than you would normally see on a loss list. I don't know where those other screen grabs are from, but I'm going to go to now. This is going back in time. This is the 24th of December, where he was missing quite a few days due to being massively overworked. We're just going to quickly whip through this list. 171 personnel were lost on that day. This is Christmas Eve. Ukrainians losing anything particularly important? No tanks, a few bits of artillery, M101, Striker, M113, Senator, Max Pro, Humvees. Not too much to report there. In terms of overall losses, it's about a 3-to-1 loss ratio. Combat asset losses, probably about a 4-to-1, especially if you include a number of these Russian civilian vehicles in that as well. Okay, we have the Ursa Major sunk, so included the ship that was lost off Gibraltar. We have a Su-25 that was damaged, intercepted by a Zala. So that's the one that flew into reconnaissance drone. Remember, I reported that. Sorry, my fingers are going a bit mental. I reported that a Su-25 had a very close encounter with one of its own reconnaissance drones and came back pretty damaged. That's being reported there. What else do we have? About 8 tanks, a couple of track garden shed there, T-72 with mine rollers, and some T-80s and whatnot. A couple of track garden sheds, actually. Okay, infantry fighting vehicle, another 20 of those, BMP-1s, 2s, 3s, BTR-82s. About 60% of those destroyed and abandoned. And then some APCs, MRAPs, and IMVs and whatnot. Vistrel, interesting. Let's see what a Vistrel MRAP is. I've not heard of that ever. and see. Obviously, it's going to be. Why does that keep happening? Um, Obviously, this is going to be a Russian-made one. You would have thought. BPM 97 is what it is. So that is evidently called a Vistral. I assume battle vehicle of the border guard. So there we go. I can't see anywhere that is called a Vistral. Control F. There you go, Vistral 4x4. Yeah, it literally says it there. So there you go. That a couple of those were lost. We don't see too many MRAPs used by the Russians. They prefer to use infantry fighting vehicles and general APCs and whatnot. So it is interesting when you get a couple of those. Border guard vehicle there more generally. Then a bunch of civilian vehicles, including motorcycles, even a Land Rover there thrown in on the Russian losses. So they have had a worse day than the Ukrainians, I think, on the 24th on Christmas Eve. Just thought I'd throw that analysis in for you as well. Okay, going back to the helicopters as previously mentioned, Russian aviation mill bloggers or bloggers write that the crew of the Mi-8 that was shot down died. There is actually an interception. I think it's from that helicopter, not the other one, but I can't be sure. That there was an interception of the call that they put through, the Mayday call, which is, it hits hard when you those are the last words that man would have said, as he said, yep, we've been hit, we're going down type thing, and it records, all of his analysis of what was going on there. Now, Jakub Yanovsky says more good news, and this confirms the HUR, so the Ukrainian intelligence report that mentioned damaging another Mi-8. Apparently it crashed later. So Noel reports here saying Russian channels such as Russian aviation related fighter bomber reports on the losses after Ukraine's naval drone attack. Not one but two Mi-8 helicopters were shot down. Both crews likely got killed as well. We quote, "We haven't lost so many of our best guys at once since 2022, fighter bomber adds." So this is actually a really heavy loss of expertise. Jeff 2146 says about Black Sea, so this is a Belgian guy that does a lot of OSINT work. The Black Sea is no longer a safe zone for Russian aviation, especially helicopters responding to USV attacks, so unmanned sea vehicle attacks. Referring to another source that says, according to Russian aviation affiliated Telegram channel fighter bomber, as we heard, several helicopters shot down, crew were killed in this engagement. They call it the largest loss of veteran helo crew since 2022. So remember, it's not always about the helicopters themselves or the airframes themselves, whether fixed wing or rotary. It is the crew, those trained up crew that take some time. I mean, they've got arguably quite a large number of planes and helicopters they could use. We're really unsure as to how many are in proper working order. But it's going to be, I think, the crew that are more difficult to replace. Now, the Russians have tried to take out some HIMARS. Here you can see cluster munitions and unitary warheads going off as well. Russians spent about $30 million in an attempt to destroy one of Ukraine's HIMARS and failed, says Jay in Kiev. Well, if we look back at AMK mappings analysis of just over a minute's worth of footage here, we found out the result of the Russian missile strike on Berislav district. That's just up the river from Kherson city. 3 Russian Iskander-M ballistic missiles were used to target Ukrainian HIMARS. 3 different types were used. The first classic 9M723 missed the HIMARS completely. The submunitions of the 9M723K5 cluster munition detonated in the area, and the final missile with an airburst. So the airburst, instead of releasing submunitions that then explode when they hit the ground, the airburst explodes above the ground, and it kind of, you can imagine like a cone downwards of shrapnel and all sorts that take out a wider range of, or takes out targets in a wider range than a single unitary munition would. The airburst hit closer at the end of the column, probably causing some damage to a pair of the rear launchers. So it wasn't just one HIMARS. I think there were a few HIMARS supposedly on show here. As ever, I can't really show you the imagery because I'll get restricted. But you can see here that there is evidence of at least some vehicles, and so that first missed, then one was more likely to have got so here you go. So the 3 vehicles are there. Submunitions don't land on them, but you don't know what kind of shrapnel damage gets done to those vehicles. And there's another one that hits then much closer to them. So that will probably have done more damage, but no direct hits, and those, they aren't cheap missiles, but it will be a real boon for the Russians if they did definitely take out some HIMARS. There might have been some limited damage to HIMARS there, but it's just a lot of speculation. Right, going on to distance strikes, and we're actually going to go to the night before, because when I released my video yesterday, I recorded it quite early and they didn't have the infographic out, even though I released it really late because I forgot to press go and then went for a day out in London, typically, and was halfway through watching the Stranger Things play, where I was like, oh, I didn't press go, did I? Literally realised in the middle of that, and had my phone turned off and I wasn't going to turn it on in the middle of the theatre. So that was late, and I didn't let you know the stats from yesterday's missile attack. So 1 Kinjal was taken out of 1. 0 out of 6 Iskander-M or KN-23, they're the North Korean missiles. 5 out of 6 KH-69 aerial bombs, it says here. 0 out of 8 KH-22 cruise missiles. So all 8 cruise missiles got through yesterday, and all 40 attack drones were taken out, 16 shot down, 24 with electronic warfare. So quite a few cruise missiles getting through there. I wonder where they were aimed, those KH-22, to have had 0% interception rate for them. So there was some certainly some challenge for the Ukrainians yesterday in the attack. Now, last night people were expecting a pretty wide-ranging attack, given it was New Year's Eve and the Russians do like a bit of symbolism. The specialist predicting, says Tim White, over 100 drones that would be fired into Russia were indeed spot on. The terrorist state launched 111, and despite the damage in Kyiv, Ukraine says no drone reached its target. 63 were shot down, 46 stopped with electronic warfare, so that's 109, and 2 disappeared off to Belarus and Russia, so it's all 111. So a perfect interception rate, according to the Ukrainians, but there was damage from falling debris, quite a few fires and things getting hit. As you would expect with 111 drones, all of those drones come down. So there's 111 things, many of them with explosive devices on board. If they're not blown up in the interception, it's more likely that unless it's, if it's taken down by a mobile fire defense unit with, say, I don't know, an autocannon, some kind of machine gun, you're, I guess, more likely to take out the wings, and these things will then fall to ground. If they've got an explosive on board, then it will explode when it hits the ground. If it's going to get hit with, or if it's taken out with electronic warfare, it will fall to the ground, but the explosive won't be invalidated. That won't be taken out by the electronic warfare. So unfortunately, these things will blow up when they hit the ground. So 111 things, many with explosive devices on board, will result in a lot of destruction around Ukraine, even though there's a 100% interception rate. So, falling drone debris ignited fires in 2 Kyiv districts, damaging a residential building, a school, and cars. There was indeed at least 1 person died last night from the strikes. 2 people died in Kyiv. Oh no, yeah, at least 1, so 2 here, according to Euromaidan Press, died in Kyiv after Russia's drone attack on January the 1st. 6 people were injured. A residential and an administrative building were damaged. Even on New Year, Russia was only concerned with how to hurt Ukraine, said Zelensky. 111 attack drones against our cities. And when you have people comfortably sitting at home in these different countries, whether it be Hungary, Slovakia, or the US, people like Senator Mike Lee and others who denigrate the Ukrainians, spare a thought for the fact that they have consistently every night for months and months and months had to deal with Russia bombing the country, sending missiles and drones into the country. It frustrates the bejesus out of me that these wingnuts attack Ukraine for trying to defend itself when they don't take that time and they don't put that effort into slagging off Russia for frickin' doing it every single night. It's disgusting, and I think it shows that they are morally bankrupt. And I'm in danger of ranting, but honestly, that annoys me. I think I get more annoyed with people in allied countries. I think I do get more annoyed with people in allied countries not denigrating Russia and denigrating Ukraine than I do with Russians themselves. There's something that gets my goat way more than Russians saying it. Ugh. War Translated said last night, and we are not hearing, I'm hearing no news this morning, at least so far, of Ukrainian strikes on Russia, and yet last night there was quite a lot of talk of it. So at least 6 Storm Shadow missiles, last night, that was something else. We'll come to that in a second. Storm Shadow missiles threat in Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod, Kaluga, Smolensk, Oriol, Voronezh, Lipetsk, Rostov, Krasnodar regions, and occupied Crimea. So there were loads of people raising alarms last night in all of these areas, and yet actually we're not hearing about anything today. So whether or not there were no strikes, I simply don't know. The Russians were on the socials last night complaining and ringing the alarm bells of potential Storm Shadow strikes. War Translated says at least 6 Storm Shadow missiles struck Lugov yesterday. 8 Russian servicemen were killed and 22 were injured, according to Russian media. So that was going back, I think, to the previous strikes where I was saying Lugov was struck. The 810th Marines Naval Infantry Brigade had been taken out of action in the Kursk sector with, I think, you had these strikes on Lugov, a couple of strikes on Lugov and Rilsk as well, which are 2 towns, larger towns north of the sector where people are actually fighting, and they are used as the kind of staging areas for the Russian defense of Kursk. Now, there have been a number of high-ranking officials that have been taken out with these strikes. It says Storm Shadow missiles. Russians claiming Storm Shadows were used. I don't know. I think HIMARS are more likely. It's within HIMARS range, and there was talk about these being HIMARS strikes. The Russians are probably going to be talking up Storm Shadows being used more often than they probably are, and I think you can get that from the kind of panic that you often see on social media of Russians claiming, Storm Shadows are attacking, Storm Shadows. And I'm fairly positive they rarely actually are. But yeah, it could have been that Storm Shadows were used widely on Lugov or not. Okay. Moving on to other bits and pieces. So Ukraine has maintained its power grid integrity despite Russian attacks in 2024, according to Denis Shmyhal, the Prime Minister. Kiev, quote, attracted over 1 billion euros in contributions from partners to the Ukrainian Energy Support Fund to restore the power facilities. It has done an amazing job to keep its country functioning, just full stop, but the energy infrastructure going on a daily basis, considering the attention to it the Russians have given with regard to missiles and drones and, consistent attacks every day. So well done, Ukraine, for keeping that energy infrastructure at least largely functioning. Quite incredible. Now, if you are interested in the organization of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Jeff 2146, that guy I was talking about previously, has created a bunch of infographics to show his knowledge so far of all the different units and how they are arranged. It's quite interesting looking at this. If you know, some of these badges I've got myself. I've met some of the people from some of these units. So, for example, if we look at the Marine Corps of Ukraine, if we go down to, I think it's this one here, 36 Marine Brigade, that 1st Marine Battalion there, that badge is that one over there, and some guy took that off his shoulder to give to me. I met these guys somewhere near Kherson when they were operational around Krinky. You've got other ones as well that will ring a bell too, all over the shop here. But interesting infographics. Go and check them out. He's got a lot that he doesn't know in terms of who does what for different units. He's mainly got the main intelligence directorate filled out here with the special brigades like the Kraken Regiment and so on and so forth. But if you're interested in that, go and check him out. and he actually sells these at a dollar a pip for them if you don't want the watermarks on them. Special Operations Forces. Where is the 225th? I wonder. That's one I see mentioned so often. And yeah, I know I have that one too up there. Anyway, it'll be there somewhere, I'm sure. Okay, right, moving on. That's not newsworthy. This is Budanov, the head of the intelligence, has said next year for Ukraine will definitely be better than 2024. I'd always take everything he says with a pinch of salt. He's not always been right either. So he made some pretty big calls about Crimea, and that was prior to the counter-offensive in May 2023, when the Ukrainians were planning on making these huge 30-kilometre-a-day gains and actually ended up making only matters of kilometres. There are objective factors for this, and I hope that we will see a lot of good events. Well, Russia will have to make very difficult decisions, he says. Well, let's go to RBC Ukraine. That reports on him and what he says. How long can Russia continue war at its current scale? What intelligence says. Russia is still capable of continuing its war in Ukraine at the current scale. However, by 2025, the Russian economy and financial sector are expected to reach a critical threshold, states Budanov, head of the intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, during a live broadcast on a national telephone. Quote, unfortunately, they are capable of waging a war against Ukraine at the current scale. They are capable. The Russian economy is slowly regressing. As they say, everyone observes its decline. But as I mentioned earlier, by 2025, we will definitely see the Russian economy and financial sector reaching a critical threshold. I think he means in 2025, not by 2020, because that means like now. By now. However, he noted that this would not mean the collapse of Russia. Quote, this is a point after which they will need to make serious systemic decisions at the state level. Until then, it will be difficult for them, but they will hold on. After that, they will have to make significant decisions. Yes, they might fully transition to a wartime economy, but whether they want to do so is a big question, he added. What else? When asked whether the Defense Intelligence has information on the number of missiles Russia has stockpiled to false strikes against Ukraine, Budanov said the volumes are sufficient. Quote, this is classified information about the number of missiles, as I'm sure you understand. The only thing I will say, unfortunately, is that Russia's missile stockpiles are absolutely sufficient to continue their terrorist activities. We previously stated that Ukraine still maintains an advantage over Russia in the context of drone warfare. However, Russian forces are now extensively using FPV drones with fiber optics cables, which poses a significant problem. More videos today coming out of like how the Russians are using those much more heavily now to get around problems with interference from electronic warfare. Quote, in the drone war, we are still winning, but the Russians have massively turned to using drones with cables. This is what is referred to as fiber optics. Yes, this is currently a huge problem for us. So that's coming from the horse's mouth there, and I think it does give you an indication of the challenges the Ukrainians face there. Now, a bit of bad news for Ukraine. This is coming from, pinch of salt maybe, but the Yuri Butasov, the Ukrainian journalist, is he's a bit of a doomer, but he's often, correct in what he says. So journalist Butasov was told about the catastrophic situation in the 155th Brigade Anna of Kiev, or Anna de Kiev. This was a French-trained unit that people had high hopes for, and then might have been sort of butchered to send here and there, rather than be used as a single unit. But it's worse than that. So there were sort of large-scale defections even before they went to full training in France, and then defections afterwards, and it was organisationally quite chaotic, apparently, according to Butasov. So this was reported by journalist and editor of Censor.net, Yuri Butasov, in a post on his social network. He noted that he conducted a deep investigation to find out the reasons why the brigade is in a catastrophic situation, which led to significant losses among personnel and equipment and mass desertion. Butasov blames the leaders of Supreme Commander-in-Chief's headquarters, so he basically blames it right to the top, who continue to waste lives and state funds on new projects instead of strengthening experienced and combat-ready brigades. So this is a criticism you see quite often, which is don't make new brigades. You just need to be putting in reinforcements to already created brigades. And yeah, that's a criticism that seems to maintain at the moment. They're trying to avoid responsibility and put it to the officers in a hopeless situation who have to conduct a political project poorly organised by the top leadership, he writes. So it's obviously expensive creating this new brigade and then getting France to train it and then equip it. However, even at the time of training the brigade in France, 50 servicemen deserted from it. So France has fully fulfilled all the obligations to train it and do, this isn't France's problem. This raised questions among the French leadership about the seriousness of the Ukrainians' attitude to the implementation of such an expensive project. A scandal broke out. The issue was raised at the headquarters, and the State Bureau of Investigation opened a criminal case, the Post says. According to Butazov, the 155th Brigade began to form in Ukraine in March 2024, and experienced officer Dmitry Ryumshin was appointed as the commander. It looked promising. The formation and staffing of the brigade was the responsibility of the Operational Command West. The commander was General Shvedyuk. Chief of Staff was Colonel Seletsky, and the commander of the ground forces, General Pavlyuk. But from the beginning, it turned out the OC West has neither command personnel, nor soldiers, nor weapons, nor resources to create a new unit. The formation of 155th Brigade was, from the first days, was a complete organisational chaos in literally all components. Butazov points out. Due to poor organisation during the spring and summer, the brigade experienced massive desertion. By the time the brigade left for training in France in October, the desertion had reached almost 1,000 people. So it's clear that this would continue in France, he noted. By July and August, more than 2,550 servicemen were removed from the 155th Brigade to replenish other units. So this was the idea that was used to then support other units, which I said previously is understandable, but really these should have been trained personnel for those units initially, rather than create a whole new unit and then break it up to give it to the other units, if you get my meaning. Anyway, it goes on to say that while there are loads of issues, there's still loads of people from the unit fighting really well. They're in Pokros. They are taking heavy losses though, in terms of personnel and equipment. In addition, Butazov emphasizes that although Anna de Kiev brigade was fully equipped with infantry, artillery and armoured vehicles, it did not have drones, and we heard about this, so they would then I think the French were asking about this as well. The main means of intelligence and control in modern warfare, which made it actually limitedly suitable for conducting combat operations. So that could be another reason why it was sort of chopped up and given to different units, because actually you couldn't operate on its own because you didn't have the drone capability to do so, which is quite frankly staggering, because you'd think that the Ukrainians would know exactly what was needed in terms of drones. As a result, the brand new Leopard 2A4 tanks and VAB armoured vehicles suffered losses, attacked by enemy drones at the very first attempts to use them in battle, Butazov notes. So this is evidently what it was used as the 155th. So on and so forth. And he blames it right, he takes it right to the top in all the people that should be blamed, including Zelensky, Umarov, Sursky, and Pavlyuk. So there you go. It's a pretty damning article using Butazov's social media claims there. On to better news for Ukraine. The Russian ruble is already celebrating the new year and is falling, says Max 2024. So as of yesterday, it was at 113 rubles to the dollar. We are only a few hours away from the Russian pipeline going to Slovakia being permanently closed, says Tendar, and the Russian currency has reached another low. And it's worth noting, I'll talk about this in the Geopolitics video later, that the transit to Slovakia has been turned off, the Gazprom transit through Ukraine. So that's going to be incredibly important. In fact, there are, that will cost Russia $6 billion, is it? So it's hugely costly for Russia. It's actually costly for Ukraine to a degree, and it will be a problem for Slovakia and Hungary, of course, and they're trying desperately to stop this from happening. And Slovakia have then threatened Ukraine with cutting off energy supply to Ukraine. And I've reported that Poland have offered to step up, or actually other countries have as well. I think Bulgaria and maybe other countries too have offered to provide energy for Ukraine. There's also Transnistria has been turned off by Russia, which is fascinating, and that Bulgaria I think have offered to send energy to Moldova, Transnistria, I believe too. So yeah, there's all sorts of carry on going on in that neck of the woods to do with hydrocarbons and the transit of hydrocarbons. I do think on balance that Ukraine are doing the right thing and have more leverage than other nations like Slovakia and indeed Russia. Russia want to sell this stuff, and meanwhile they are getting bypassed by the new railway that China's decided to build that bypasses Russia, goes through the Kyrgyzstan and other nations to the south of Russia. They are being hit possibly with. We'll wait and see what OPEC is doing in terms of supply of hydrocarbons on the national level. Then you've got Trump saying he's going to drill, and you've already got the Biden administration drilling and producing more hydrocarbons than any other country in the history of the earth this last year. So all of these things together can really affect Russia. They're also being hit more, I think, more precisely with sanctions in terms of their energy industry going forward. And I just think that the screw might be turned. We have a chance to really turn the screw on Russia this year, economically speaking. And let's hope that the Trump administration comes in and actually continues to do so. Okay, I'm just going to play you this. I don't think it's from particularly recently. It's something he said before. In fact, I think I've reported him saying this before, but I like this ethos.
And that's why if I'm afraid to lose our people, because the people are the most important, because everything is this war for independence of the people, not of the land, of the people, because people, it's really a nation, and that's
what makes a nation is the people, not the land. So it's more important that we don't lose people than we don't lose land. And I think that's interesting and absolutely right. Although Butazov might have something to say about decisions that are made that end up losing people. But in principle, that's absolutely right. And that's not what Russia's doing. Russia's more interested in land than people. And that includes both its own people and people from North Korea. They care absolutely not at all about North Koreans. Right, I'm just going to, because it's New Year, let's start on a positive. Alexandra Pascal lost her leg due to a Russian attack in Odessa. In the summer of 2022, she got a prosthetic leg and returned to gymnastics. Recently, Alexandra participated in a tournament. That little girl is incredibly strong and brave. So let's see some positivity with regard to a gymnast who has lost her leg.
мужності та незламності Олександра ми хочемо привітати та подякувати вам. І, звісно ж, Вадима, ми будемо вдячні, якщо ви зможете вручити нагороді Олександра. І, звісно ж, глядачі, привітайте, будь ласка. Адже саме сьогодні, саме в цей час, так важливо підтримувати, дякувати та пам'ятати.
Good luck to her in her career. Hope she gets a little bit more than a massive teddy, although I'm sure that has been warmly received. So good stuff to see hope restored for people who have suffered such a huge amount in this war. Excellent stuff. Anyway, take care, everybody, and I will speak to you soon. Happy Merry New Yearmas. And I hope this is a good one for you and a better one for Ukraine.